Memory transcription subject, Onso, Yodel technical specialist. Date, Standardized Human Time, March 25, 2137. After the human troops leapt from our ship toward the lunar surface, survival up in the stars proved to be a harrowing task. There were several factors that left our warship in a precarious spot. On a grander scale, the gap we'd cleared with 3 rounds of antimatter bombs had sealed. The UN drones had borrowed seconds for us against hopeless numbers, falling by the thousands. Half of our allies were situated on the other side of the Shadow Fleet, but were unable to help us retreat due to their own problems. Turning back wasn't an option, and with that door closed, it was a matter of avoiding immediate death. The nuclear weapons tucked away on the moon were launched as soon as we got past the fleet, leaving us quite the radioactive payload to evade. Drones scrambled to cut them down, despite having Kolshians spitting plasma at their heels. While our drones on this side of the globe had suffered heavy casualties, manned ships hadn't gone unscathed either. Our vessel had taken a beating, with several direct hits to our underbelly, and we lacked any shields once those were taken down. Honestly, if someone didn't engineer a way to facilitate a shield current despite magnetoresistance, they were all but useless in future battles. The United Nations hadn't scrounged up any alternative innovations on that front yet. While I had my eyes on any missile launches, we couldn't afford to take many more hits from conventional weapons as well. Our craft was hanging together by a thread, with a single love tap able to cause structural integrity to unravel. Even if Sovlin, Carlos, and Samantha are able to gain control of the ground stations, that will take time. I'm not sure how we're supposed to hold out against nukes, free shots for planetary defense lasers, and Shadow Fleet ships. The Terran fighters were mere nuisances to the drones, and were getting their asses handed to them. Though it was difficult to discern through the sea of sensor blips, the Duerden Shield and Sapient Coalition seemed to be struggling against a Dominion assault. The Arxer had brought tons of spacecraft into the fray, while the Avian Alliance was showing novel aggression. The Greys were the seasoned veterans in that department. The Carnivores hadn't been expecting such a fight from the homogeneity, but they adapted their strategies swiftly. Concurrently, on the far side of Alpha, Chief Hunters Ilthus and Uslif's fleet had been reduced to stray remnants. The UN drones and technocracy craft there were left outnumbered, on their own, and unable to join our engagement by the moon. This is not how we wanted the battle to go. Particle beams alone won't win this fight, I hissed. Tyler scratched his blonde scalp. Let's hope taking the planetary defenses is enough. We don't have many tricks left in the bag. 'Less you got something in mind, Onso? My suggestion is to get somewhere those lasers can't have free rein to shoot us. Except we can't go back the way we came, and we've suffered enormous losses. The way I see it, we just need more ships. The Shield and Ilthus just don't cut it. This goes to show why we ain't provoked the Dominion. We didn't want to fight them and the Shadow Fleet at the same time, or for betterment to know how much we had their number. Guess that ship has sailed, huh? I think if things get much worse, the Duerden will follow through on their promise to bomb Alpha. Since we are on the brink of defeat, maybe you should tell them to. My friend's jaw muscles tightened. I don't want to authorize that. I know. Neither do I, after seeing how senseless the glassing of Kato was, but even if we flip the planetary defenses, it'll be too late to bring back our losses. We might have lost 50,000 ships across all our allies, which is a large chunk of our fleet. Enemy casualties are maybe 20,000 so far, and that's almost solely from particle weapons, which most of our fleet doesn't have. I don't see a scenario where we win here. The sensors officer's scowl deepened, displeased with my suggestions. His blue eyes seemed to be counting the minutes that had passed since Sovlin and his team leapt into space. They should be barging into the complexes by now, given how close their landing sites were. It was a miracle we'd managed to keep out of range and alive that long. What would happen to the troops if we fell, and they were left stranded on that moon with limited oxygen? What would become of humanity and the Yodel, if our all-out attack came up short? I supposed before drastic, scorched earth action would be authorized, we should see if the planetary defenses could be impactful enough. A laser from the moon was identified as aiming at us, leaving us mere seconds to swerve off its vector. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, as my brain came up empty of any last-ditch strategies. We would have won this battle if it was just the Kolshians. We'd done admirably to make it this far, with the Dominion joining in. But now, I could see 2 Shadow Fleet vessels tearing after us, lining us up for when their plasma weapons recharged. I desperately passed along the nearest drone's coordinates to weapons, but thanks to the foe's dramatic twirl, our shot didn't cripple it like I'd hoped. It merely made a dent in its armor, so meaningless that the hostile didn't slow in its pursuit. There had been a momentary pause in the planetary defense firing, but I could see the entire complex lighting up below us now. It was a shame we were out of bombing range, and that we'd committed to foot soldiers taking the installation regardless. I fumbled with the sensor readout, searching to map the laser's path. How were we meant to dodge 2 plasma beams that would tear off any second, and a laser? We still had a physical barrier to deploy to impede one incoming munition, but we couldn't shield both sides. I made a split-second decision, and relayed the suggestion to drop it in front of the Shadow Fleet. While the lasers were stronger, the chances of evading synchronized plasma arcs were slim without some fortress. Captain Monahan's weary eyes turned to the bridge crew. We've received word from our unit leaders on the ground. All planetary defenses are under our control, except for a single module that was able to initiate self-destruct. I could see an explosion near the shadowy border of the moon, where sunlight wasn't illuminating its cratered surface. The sensor's readout had switched the defense complexes to friendly indicators, after that new info was fed into its database. I tilted my head in confusion, wondering why the nearest lasers were powering up and pointing at us. My befuddlement turned into a laugh, perhaps a sign that I was delirious from the stress of the battle. We might not be on track to win the battle, but it was amusing that the Shadow Fleet had no idea what was coming. A bluish flash radiated from the powerful weapons, and I tracked its lightning-quick path across the viewport. The complex's computer had charted the optimal angle to sizzle through both Kolshian drones, splicing them clean in half before the algorithms realized what changed. Planetary defenses revved to life on our side, finally granting some breathing room to our battered fleet. Without having to worry about flying straight into a stream of hostile lasers, I relayed a suggested course to sensors. It would take us as close to the lunar surface as possible. Further, that locale was in the blind spot of the complexes, so we didn't have to worry about friendly fire. It would also aid in getting the shuttles, evacuating our soldiers, back onto the ship. As insensitive as Sovlin could be, it felt weird standing on the bridge without his jabs. With our former pursuers dead in the water, our warship beelined toward the moon with a new lease on life. I highlighted the marker of the UN shuttle assigned to our vessel, seeing that it was circling over the evac point. The soldiers would need a few minutes to travel by foot to the pickup site. To my knowledge, the rovers had been left behind and jury-rigged with explosives, in case any Kolshians thought to retake the facilities. Sovlin, Samantha, and Carlos wouldn't return for a little while longer. I tried to focus on picking out long-range targets, knowing that we needed to tilt casualties in our favor. The lasers had struck down thousands of enemies, in the brief span we had them online, but the Kolshians were mobilizing on a bombing route. We had to push the Shadow Fleet back, despite how ill-equipped we were. It would be nice if we could rally the technocracy and UN vessels from the other side of the globe, but they were in hot water. The Shadow Fleet was pelting them with missiles and plasma, and if the hostiles burned through their munition stores, they would ram themselves into Terran ships. We couldn't replicate that crash-and-burn strategy, given that we were outnumbered. Back on our side, it would be a sacrificial play, summoning the Durertan Shield and the Sapient Coalition to hound the Kolshians from behind. Still, even though the Dominion had them on their heels, I thought we had to bring them to us. If the planetary defenses are bombed out, with hardly a chance to rack up casualties, it's over. We got mowed down like flies taking the complex, so we need an equalizer. I pinned my ears back against my head. Tyler, sir. Have comms reach out to the Duerten. I know they won't like orders from us, but persuade them to abandon their positions against the Arxer. We need something to hound the Shadow Fleet from behind. The Shield will be massacred, and then the Dominion will come at us too. Officer Cardona objected. I know, but it'll keep them at bay for a few extra minutes. We've invested too much in the planetary defenses. The UN drones took too many losses on our side to get us to the drop point, and we can't handle the Shadow Fleet alone. The lasers are all we have. It's a simple calculation of what the greatest asset is. Fuck. We can't have gone through all of this to lose the lasers, and the Shield are gonna fall one-on-one with the Arxer anyway. I'll have Monahan pass along the message. She'll tell them the truth, that it's the only way, and hope they go for it. If you remind them that this is all to stop the Shadow Fleet from marching on Calqua, I believe the Duerten will make that sacrifice. They want to bring the Kolshians down, at all costs. My human friend shuffled off, and I snuck a glimpse at the shuttle sensor dot near the lunar surface. It was lifting off with our crewmates in tow, assuming all had gone well. Sovlan was a brave Gojid, to pull that death-defying stunt alongside the primates. I couldn't wait to hear some version of how a primitive like me wouldn't have been able to handle a jetpack, ignoring the fact I'd used them during maintenance spacewalks. Regardless of our fleet's dire straits in the battle for the galaxy, some things never changed. If there wasn't some kind of comment about my intellectual capacity, I would be concerned. My attention returned to the present circumstances on the bridge, where Monahan huddled over her comms. I didn't envy that conversation, but whatever she was saying seemed to be working. The Shield was trying to sidestep the Arxer vessels, who'd moved in for an up-close and personal kill. The Sapient Coalition was running interference. As the weakest links, their prey crews still proved selfless, standing in the way of blistering guns. Our plasma weapons could land a few long-range shots, but between drone evasion capabilities and distance, our accuracy was lacking. Watching our side's desperate actions now, I wished I hadn't gotten my hopes up back when early reinforcements entered the system. Hey, don't go doom and gloom on me. Tyler tapped his palm against the workstation for my attention. Your spirits look in the toilets, my man, and I won't be having that at my station. Give me one piece of good news, Onso. We're not dead yet? My tail drooped further between my legs, as I struggled to find a bright side. Reading the shuttle's passenger data, which showed 3 Kias listed among the dozens of soldiers returning to our ship, meant I couldn't attest to our friend's safety. Oh, I got one positive. Sovlan, Sam, and Carlos are heading back on the shuttle now. Assuming they're alive, we'll see them soon. That's fantastic. You know, I was worried about sending that Gojid out on something extreme like that. He's really come a long way since we first met him, and I'm glad we got a chance to make everything right between us. By making things right, you mean that you punched him in the face. Well, I was angry. You gotta know what that's like, Onso. My knuckles may have grazed his jaw, but it all worked out. This fight will work out too, so keep your head in the game. I need you to keep watch for the Dominion ships, in case they turn on us. We gotta fight to our last and be ready if the whole damn fleet comes at us. Yes, sir. I'll have the Arxer's vectors mapped pronto. It might help to forward any assessments to the SC and the Shield. Tyler gave me a hearty clap on the back, as I tried not to watch the Shield and Coalition bleed numbers. The Duerten were hurling munitions toward the Shadow Fleet with fury, forcing some to turn their attention away from our encampment by the moon. The Arxer hadn't relented for a moment, and I could see their ships burning full thrusters ahead in our direction. However, in between my last visual and the present one, it seemed like something had discombobulated them. Their movements looked uncertain and disoriented, like they'd been thrown out of subspace by a disruptor pulse. My inquisitiveness prompted me to solve the puzzle, seeking out what had caused the sudden hesitation. The majority of the Dominion ships seemed to reach a decision, forging ahead with shaky focus. However, before my watching eyes, an inexplicable breakdown occurred. Some Arxer vessels began firing on their own remnants, other agitated hunter craft turned their sights away from the Duerden, and peppered the Shadow Fleet from behind. A handful were shooting at both the Shield and Coalition, and their own side, blurring their allegiance even further. Any semblance of cohesion broke down with the infighting, as no party had a clue where to turn their guns. The Kolshians were taken off guard by the Greys' betrayal, and after a moment of consideration, began shooting all Arxer vessels with blanket condemnation. Sir, the Arxer and the Kolshians started shooting at each other. Why, I have no clue. Ilthus said he couldn't get through the comms embargo, I explained. What I can say is the same chaos is unfolding on the planet's flip side. Our drones seem to be having a resurgence in efficacy. Tyler's frosty eyes widened. This changes everything. We have to seize this opportunity, while they're reeling. How do you say it? Damn straight. We need to kick their ass before Sovlin shows up, so he can know we did it all without him. I dunno about that. There's still hundreds of thousands of ships to clear out, even if a shit ton of the ones here were Dominion. How many are on our side? We could have numbers in our favor now. It's not so simple, sir, but the Kolshians are treating the Arxer all as hostiles. So I'd venture the ones who hadn't turned on their mission will now. My opinion is that we should target the Shadow Fleet with everything we have. Damn straight. Whatever we have left, we'll have it flying at them ASAP. True to my conjecture, the Kolshians' targeting of all Arxer vessels resulted in Betterment's entire fleet rounding on them. As the eye-popping number of ships on both sides traded blows, it was clear that the Shadow Fleet was annihilating the Dominion. While the Greys landed thousands of kills through ship volume, their ranks were being ravaged much quicker. The Duerden Shield rallied among the confusion, eagerly shoving antimatter bombs meant for Offa down the Shadow Fleet's throat. Any nanodrones and cluster bombs the UN had left assailed the enemy, capitalizing on the confusion. Planetary defenses had never been contested, thanks to the diversion, and were still cranking out ship-ending lasers without refrain. I eagerly passed along a target for our plasma railgun, and noted that the indicator denoting Sovlin's transport had crossed into our ship. With the Gojid likely on his way to the bridge, I spared a glance back toward the other side of the globe. There wouldn't be any gaps in my knowledge for him to question. The Yodel technocracy was being aggressive in hounding the Shadow Fleet. With the Arxer to distract our foes, particle beams were surgically dissecting them. The Kolshians on that side were floundering enough that the UN could finally divert some drones to help our weaker flank here. We were on the cusp of winning the far half's engagement altogether, which should tilt the lunar fray heavily in our favor. My mind was reeling after, out of nowhere, it seemed that we could end the Federation within the hour. What had changed inside of the Arxer fleet, enough to sow that much division? Had humanity found a way through their cybersecurity, or was something else going on? Dominion vessels were falling in with Ilthus and Uslif's remnants on the far side, though on this half, their numbers were rapidly sinking toward zero. We needed to keep the pressure up while the Shadow Fleet's focus was still on the Arxer. The Kolshians had lost not just their allies, but tens of thousands of their own vessels to the betrayal. Even with our losses earlier, we have the advantage after this change. We have particle beams and planetary defenses still in play, to aid our reinvigorated fleet. I watched with bated breath, as I wondered if this sudden infusion of chaos would be the deciding factor in the Battle of Offa. Victory was within humanity's grasp, and now, it was up to us not to let this opportunity slip away. Memory transcription subject, Onso, Yodel Technical Specialist. Date, Standardized Human Time, March 25, 2137. The lasers from the planetary defenses gave the Kolshians no quarter, as humanity ramped up its efforts against the Shadow Fleet. While the Arxer were getting eviscerated by the higher quality drones, we took it upon ourselves to direct our allies. The Sapient Coalition, who'd been distracting the Dominion so the Duerden could go after the Commonwealth, joined the Avians in wailing on the enemy with everything they had. UN automatons mobilized from beside the moon, while the Federation was preoccupied with the frenzied Greys. More of our drones swooped in to reinforce them, coming from the far side of the planet, where our foe's fleet was capsizing. Dominion ships had fallen in with Ilthus, and were meandering toward our half of the globe. Yodel technocracy vessels stationed over there took charge of hunting down the last stragglers. Our warship, meanwhile, fired off plasma shots in every mini-missile we had left, enjoying our cozy spot out of the firing lines. Even as isolated Arxer near our engagement floundered, they were hellbent on issuing parting gifts, that meant every missile or close-range kinetic they could throw against Kolshan metal. No algorithm could escape the quantity of weapons firing all around our enemy. The Shadow Fleet numbers were ticking down like sand in an hourglass. I was transfixed by the viewport, as far-reaching particle beams cut through Kolshan vessels with an invisible paw. The Dominion had comprised close to half of the enemy contingent here, so flipping their ship count alone put us on even numerical odds. The planetary defenses were built to tear any invading foes to shreds, which meant they could smite thousands of Alpha's defenders until they were removed from play. The enemy had no chance to take the complexes offline. We were really doing it. I wasn't sure the Shadow Fleet could fend off the assault even if the UN, the SC, the Technocracy, and the Duerden shield ships were taken out of the equation. The Arxer are the miracle reinforcements we needed, here all along. It wasn't worth the risk of provoking betterment before, but now was the opportune moment to flip the Greys. However humanity achieved that, it was a Ralkasend. I perked my ears up. Sir, I'm sure you know, but we should take precautions with our manned vessels. We need as many ships like ours intact as possible to occupy Alpha. It's ideal if this doesn't turn into a two-way bloodbath. Right on. I'm going to the ground, when we end this fight, to find out what happened to Slanek. I don't know if you want to come with me, but you ain't got to. There's no telling what we're walking into, Tyler replied. I wouldn't let you bumble off on your own. After their ordeal, we'll have to see if Sovlin and company are up for another ground excursion. They could be worn out. Might need some shut-eye. Well, this battle's been ongoing for a lot of fucking hours. We're all tired, but we can rest when the Federation no longer exists as an entity. Any ideas for how we help kill the ones up here, quick and easy? I gestured toward the sea of explosions, as the Kolshans were bombarded by thousands of munitions. I say we sit back and watch the show. Is this what fireworks are like on Earth? I see why you said it's beautiful. This is a fine light show, but spectating ain't really seizing the opportunity, Onso. I thought you wanted to make them pay. Well, I also want to make it back to learn, and see you and all the others on a return flight to Earth. We can still kick their ass from here. It just takes a little imagination. I'll bite. What's your play? Remember on the submarine, with the torpedoes, how they went past the enemy and looped back? Why don't we try that with our missiles? With the abundance of stimuli right now, the Kolshan drones might see them as off-target, less warheads would be deflected. Tyler tapped my screen. Forward your suggested pathing to weapons. I'll loop everyone into the picture. Proud of myself for improvising that idea mid-conversation, I began passing along targeting vectors to weapons. The missiles could have new instructions transmitted to them mid-flight, coordinates I'd have standing by for the humans to send them doubling back. There were still 60,000 active Shadow Fleet ships, despite their enormous losses. While that count was much lower than our combined force, we had to take them down before they could land a counterpunch. The flipped Dominion ships were going to be a memory in the next few minutes. That meant we'd bear the enemy's full attention soon, if we couldn't dial up the pressure. Plus, the racist old Gojid will be back any minute. I don't want him to get a word in, questioning my skills in this station. It was as if the thought of that former Federation captain summoned him. I could hear the clicking of claws on the floor behind me, the methodical plodding of Sovlin's feet. However, the light strikes of boots belonged to a single pair, and it wasn't the commanding thuds of Carlos' bulky form. Samantha looked unusually dispirited, the standard sneer wiped from her face. The Gojid's haughty air was also missing, replaced by his claws curling into a ball with rage. I drew in a sharp breath, as I put two and two together about what happened on the moon. While I hadn't known Carlos well, he had always been a kind-hearted presence on the bridge. Tyler's mouth parted with sorrow, as his bushy eyebrows slanted downward. How bad is it? Carlos isn't coming back, Sovlin said, in a voice that lacked tonality. He squeezed his eyes shut, as if to bury his emotions. Tell me the planetary defenses made a difference. If we didn't have a chance, our whole mission was for nothing. I placed my tail on his wrist for a brief second. Those lasers killed at least 10,000 of the Shadow Fleet ships. I'll tell you, Revenge, it didn't make me feel as good as I thought it would, but you're wired differently. Turn toward the viewport, and watch the end of the Federation. I came up with a damn good idea for our missiles. You have lots of good ideas, Anso. There's no need to prove yourself to anyone. Who are you and what have you done with Sovlin? Samantha's eyes landed on me. I'll tell you what he won't. Sovlin agreed not to call you a primitive. He told me he was proud to work alongside such a bright-eyed Taushana. My tail snapped away from the Gojid's arm. The fuck did you just say? It was a joke, but it's not funny anymore, the Gojid sighed. I don't have the heart to mess with you. That's not messing with me. That's crossing a fucking line. The only reason I'm not dropping you, military law be damned, is because you're suffering from Carlos. You ever say that word again, and I'll rearrange your facial features the way you did to Marcel. Tyler glowered at Sovlin. Then I'll throw you into another cabinet for good measure. But I'm gonna cut you some slack, and assume you weren't in your right mind 'cause of what happened to Carlos. It's a damn tragedy. I liked that guy. He had his whole life ahead of him. I'm sorry, Samantha grumbled. I didn't know there was anything wrong with that word. The Gojid slumped his shoulders. I just wanted to get under Anso's skin. For what it's worth, I only took the time to even learn culture because I like him. That's enough on this topic for now, but you're gonna hear why slurs are real fucked up later, Tyler scolded. I don't want to spit on Carlos' memory with this bullshit now, 'cause it ain't the right time. Also, I don't want to miss the Shadow Fleet getting blown the fuck up for your bullshit. My best friend's ideas are gonna wreck those ships. If anyone else had called me that charged term for Rinchins, I would have resolved this issue on the spot. However, my opinion was that Sovlin was sincere in viewing it as playful banter, without understanding how it was far beyond acceptable. It was difficult to summon anger when the Gojid looked so devastated by Carlos' demise. I was forced to consider how easy it would be for any one of us to bite the dirt. After losing one of our station's personnel, it drilled home the risk we'd be undertaking landing on Alpha. I tried to shake the thought of our peril, but I knew, now more than ever, that I was responsible to help protect our group. The pledge I'd made to my best friend wasn't one I'd back out on, no matter how much I'd love to stay up here. What I did know was that Sovlin and Samantha were committed to see this all the way through as well. While we hadn't asked them, I could tell they intended to head to Alpha's surface with us, as soon as the Shadow Fleet was eliminated. It was difficult to muster up my old exuberance, following such heavy news, but I did want to burn the Federation's fall into my memory. Years of resentment for the aliens who stole our culture and made a mockery of my species led up to today. Humanity needed one more spike of enemy casualties, and the threat of Kolshan control returning would be gone. The primates' arrival had given us a chance at being our true selves again. The missiles are away, and sailing wide of their targets. Let's see if the underwater tactics translate, if we can deliver the final punch. I'm ready for this all to be over, I've seen and done too many things that risked my welfare. The stakes of this moment weren't lost on any of the binocular-eyed faces in the room. The Terrans had endured a great deal, in such a short time frame. Much like the species who'd suffered under Federation rule for centuries, humanity had their worldview flipped upside down after first contact. I knew what it felt like to be treated as a primitive, but the burden of being viewed as a monster, unfit to exist, seemed worse. They'd been staring down the potential extinction of their species for many sleepless nights. As the explosives began to snake back toward the Shadow Fleet, I echoed the Duerden commander's wish that the Earthlings could win and find closure. The enemy seemed mystified by the explosives passing them, as they cleaned up the last of the Arxer. Particle beams were cutting down hundreds of Kolshians, from far-side UN drones closing in on them. The Duerden shield was flying with senseless aggression, not giving the bastards time to process what the missiles were up to. Our armada badgered Commonwealth marks with plasma beams from afar. Lasers scored instant kills from the complexes that Carlos had lost his life to bring into our possession. When thousands of warheads sent from an array of Terran ships doubled back in a flash, the Shadow Fleet was too overwhelmed to respond. "Here we go," Tyler declared, a grin of schadenfreude on his features. He must have been telling the truth about sharing my desire for payback, back on Learn. "This is gonna be some flashy fireworks, Onso." I was mesmerized alongside the blonde-haired human, as explosions rocked the Shadow Fleet. The hits landed in close succession, encouraging the Sapient Coalition to send follow-up missiles. Debris from the enemy detonations struck their own allies, as thousands of drones crumbled against a new tactic and sensory overload. It was now that the nearest human vessels swept in for the kill, going all out for the finish. With the numerical advantage on our side, UN automatons found the surest way to eliminate the Shadow Fleet. They rammed themselves into surviving Kolshian vessels, with guns blazing on approach. Planetary defenses had their pick of the few remaining survivors, sniping enemies without the need to recharge. Meanwhile, Ilthus' remaining band had arrived from the other side of the globe. The Arxer chased after the Shadow Fleet, hungry for revenge after the Kolshians wiped out their comrades on this half. Particle beams were still dissecting enemies, some from technocracy ships that were hurrying to aid us. My disbelieving eyes stared at the sensor readout, as our flurry of threats made quick work of the few thousand enemies that remained, after the missiles and the UN's own kamikazes. It was difficult to find hostile indicators on the screen. Control of Alpha is ours, just like that. As long as the Duerden shield will uphold their bargain about glassing the Kolshians and the Arxer will let us do the raiding, it's time to start gearing up to head planet-bound. I scrutinized my readout for the decisive moment, and wagged my tail with enthusiasm when it arrived. The Shadow Fleet has been eliminated from the orbital vicinity. It's over, humanity has control of the Federation's heart. We won. Captain Monahan didn't quiet the cheers and applause, as my shouted announcement reached the ears of the crew. Humans embraced each other, with forward-facing gazes that watered with emotion. Tyler clapped his hand on my back, with a bit too much force. Samantha reached out for her fellow guard, to find he wasn't there. She finally let the tears overflow, while shooting brief glances toward Sovlin. My gaze hardened with resolution, since I knew what I said wasn't entirely true. It wasn't over. What came next was uncovering the truth about how the Shadow Fleet operated, to ensure they weren't hiding out somewhere in space. If we discovered the origins of the conspiracy along the way, that would finally close the case on why the Kolshians were doing this. I didn't care what their reasons were, but humanity did. Tyler mentioned something about recording history to avoid it happening again in the future. Assuming we were able to land safely, the United Nations still had to reckon with the fate of Alpha, and the entire galaxy. Tyler pursed his lips, once the celebrations settled down. "Alright, we ain't breaking out the champagne yet. Anyone who's heading to the surface, follow me to the hangar. We'll get a briefing there on everything we need to know, and any intel on the Shadow Caste that might help, then we're going." No time like the present. Everyone else, watch out for enemy stragglers and reinforcements. Intel says that was all the ships they had, but we can't afford to get blindsided. Now who's with me? I'm coming with you, Sovlin said. Samantha bobbed her shoulders. I haven't shot enough Kolshians for what happened out there. Let's go. Glad we're all sticking together. Let's just be careful for any spiteful traps they set for us down there, I growled. Tyler bared his teeth. Yep, the way I heard it, all human soldiers will be wearing gas masks. I'm a red meat guy, don't want to be cured. Red meat? Sovlin wrinkled his nose with utter disgust, a trace of his normal attitude surfacing. You mean, blood-soaked? Nah, I'm talking about the color of their flesh, my dude. Which is determined by how much oxygen is held in the muscles, I added, with a tail lash of mischief. The Gojid flailed his claws. Why the fuck do you know that? I didn't need to think about that, Onso. I mean, Protector, are you getting a doctorate in predation? I know many things. You'd be amazed what reading actual words on paper can teach you. Tyler smirked. Something tells me Sovlin doesn't want knowledge about our culture. Why don't we resume the discussion about meat eating on the ride down? I'd rather not, Sovlin spat. Just walk, Predator. My exchange partner snickered to himself. It was clear that our orbital victory had lifted everyone's spirits, except for the sullenly silent Sam. We needed to find a new normal without Carlos, so we could achieve success on our mission. As I marched toward the hangar bay, I considered how our stint on Alpha might play out. Humanity was likely taking its first actions as the default leaders of the galaxy. While I was grateful for how differently they treated aliens from the Federation, I hoped that they would continue to uphold a moral example in this new future. Memory transcription subject, Captain Sovlin, United Nations Fleet Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, March 25, 2137. Aside from my visit following the Battle of Earth, I hadn't been to the Kolshian homeworld in a long time. Riesel used to invite me to family celebrations, when he'd return home and pass along his stories from the war front. On occasion, I accepted my protégé's offer to mingle with his family. I hadn't been interested in reminders of my non-existent loved ones, by seeing his happiness with his relatives, so it had been years since I wandered this city. The UN transport touched down on a rooftop landing pad, and I could see that time hadn't changed the Federation capital much. Massive arrangements of flowers were maintained atop buildings, with the more complex artwork denoting prestige. Botany was viewed as the most peaceful, prey-like pastime, but this was the sole planet where it was a lucrative career. There was no architecture with as many adornments as the School of the Flora, which took in students from across the galaxy. Each building had its own color scheme, with words spelled out in Kolshian and pretentious common engravings. It crossed my mind that even the name of the diplomat's tongue stemmed from the word Commonwealth, showing who was really in charge. Yet for centuries, no race had realized who the Federation served. With the full scale of what had been taken from Gojidkind, the skyline that once inspired me with awe and purpose smelled rotten. While a masked Tyler and Samantha were enamored by the view from on high, I didn't want to waste a second sightseeing. There was still work to do, ensuring that the secret cast ended today. I couldn't return to Earth, where Hunter and Vizith needed my guidance, until the mission was seen to completion. I hadn't even allowed myself to think of the future until victory was ours. I could act as a father again. It blew my mind that we'd defeated the Shadow Fleet, and that subservient species could reclaim power in our own lives. Alpha was at humanity's mercy, and I hoped the Predators would use that power to sniff out any other secrets the conspiracy had. Let's get moving, I grumbled. Remind me why we landed on the roofs, not the streets? Tyler heaved a sigh. You know why. There's no telling how the Kolshians will react to Predators touching down in their grill. Last thing we need is to get caught up in a stampede, or to get mobbed or shot at. For all we know, there's shadow cast agents lying in wait to gun us down. I feel like there was something in that last thought. Maybe someone saw us landing here, and standing here admiring the view is painting a target on our backs. Baldy's right, Onso chimed in. My claws angled toward him in a threatening gesture, due to the use of that nickname. Sooner we find out what happened to Slanek and get out of here, the better. Samantha leaned back on her heels. We need a way down to the surface. Well, I can see the whole city, while I'm admiring the view. The crowds are over by the Federation Hall, along with some shit burning. Means we're clear to head on down. I say we take the elevator and walk out the front door, Tyler growled. The female human shrugged. Beats listening to Baldy screaming in my ear, rappelling down the side of the skyscraper. I'm not sure what our plan is to flush out the shadow cast, but I'm glad another team's responsible for seizing the governance hall. That's where I'm useful. I've been here several times, and I know the basic layout, I chimed in. Some civilian might talk to me about who's involved with seditious activity. That's our best bet to get any insider info. Tyler nodded in agreement with my plan, before we hurried down the rooftop access. The skyscraper, which appeared to have been a hedge fund management venture, was all but vacant. Pooling the resources of wealthy investors didn't seem to be a priority, with Predator ships in orbital control. Electricity hadn't been cut off, so the four of us squeezed into the elevator. I shouldered my rifle, ready for any threats when we reached the lobby. There was nobody to greet us when the doors swung open at the ground floor. Even the dumbest Kolshan knew that camping out in a towering building wasn't ideal if antimatter bombs hit. While I said I might be able to get Kolshans to talk to us, that might be more difficult than it seems with the humans here. I remember how Riesel shuddered when he first saw Marcel. The reason seeking out information would be a struggle became evident, once someone saw our group hustling out onto the streets. A single scream from a passerby, followed by pointing at us with an indigo tentacle, caused anyone walking nearby to scatter. I contemplated where the Kolshans wouldn't be able to run, which left anyone who stayed in their residences. After taking a moment to catch my bearings, I led the humans toward the setting sun. Our posse traipsed down the eerie sidewalk. I knew we were forced to barge into someone's home and intimidate them. All we sought was a small pointer in the right direction, for anyone who might talk to us willingly. Where is the shadow cast? They're not resisting our invasion at all? Onso mused aloud, as we maneuvered through the walkable city. Samantha snickered. I think they're more preoccupied with keeping their own citizens at bay. The stunts they pulled today couldn't have been popular, plus, they lost to us. We'll see how the average Kolshan feels about their government and conspiracy, if we can get someone to have a conversation with us, I mumbled. But first, I need you two to act predatory. Nobody's crawling out of the woodwork to speak with us, so we need to bust into someone's home and get some pointers. What? You want us to go and intimidate people? Tyler stiffened, as he noticed the row of compact houses, which looked like oversized storage crates. Fucking hell. How are you sure there even is anyone left alive who stood against the government, before all this? Because I knew Riesel wouldn't have stood for the things we've learned about the Commonwealth. He wasn't the only Kolshan with integrity, who would have been revolted by this tyranny. I just imagine the smart ones operated in secrecy, like the shadow cast they're opposing. You better be right, Sovlin, or we're wasting precious time they could be using to tie up loose ends. What happens to Slanek doesn't hinge on my plan. You have no alternative ideas for where to start the search, and no intel on the shadow cast's location. Are you in, or are you out? Tyler hesitated. You sure have wonderful ways of speaking to your commanding officer, but you're right that we ain't got nothing on these guys. They're ghosts. The civvies are likely as anyone to have theories. Maybe the Kolshans got an Area 51 place. A what? Onso questioned. Secret base that everyone guesses what the government's doing there. Even if it's under the ocean like their nukes, that's way too big a search area. We gotta narrow it down, so tell me what door we're kicking down. I searched for the house with the nicest garden, and trundled up that doorstep. The humans followed, before Tyler's leg removed the barrier from its hinges with a powerful kick. The Terran soldiers stormed forward, sweeping the house with guns out. They found a whimpering Kolshan beneath her kitchen table, and dragged her out screaming. Samantha jabbed her barrel right beneath the civilian's chin, shushing her threateningly. Officer Cardona seemed to be keeping an eye on the guard, though he didn't voice our disunity. We picked someone who won't be willing to go toe-to-toe with human aggression. I'm sure she'll answer our questions, under threat of having her brains blown out. Do you want us gone? Tyler barked, in the most guttural tone he could muster. The Kolshan froze, with two gun-toting predators hovering over her. Please leave. I'm not good food. We don't want to eat you, dipshit. We're asking you to talk, Samantha growled. You play nice and answer the Gojit's questions, you don't have to see us anymore. You don't sing, we shoot you and find someone else that will. What will it be? I'll help. Please, just ask and leave. Whatever you need. Not so fast. You play games with us, or we find out you've been in any way untruthful, then we come back. You'll wish we killed you up front, so think carefully about how you answer. Also remember that we're predators, so we're a lot better at deception than you are. Isn't that right? Yes. What is it you want to know? I ambled up to the Kolshan, as she quivered on the floor. It's an easy question. Do you know anyone who's involved with seditious activity against the Kolshan regime? Anyone suspected of treason, disloyalty, human sympathizing, or something in that vein? I'm not involved with that sort of thing. Wait, the civilian exclaimed, as Samantha twisted the gun. Look, I only know of one person who's under serious suspicion, the sister of a hated Kolshan traitor. She's been, ostracized, since nobody knows how deep her involvement goes. Maybe her? Tyler leaned forward. Where is this suspect? She lives 2 blocks down, just go right when you exit my place. It's the bungalow with the vine braids, flowing from her window sill. You can't miss it. Is that all? Yes, I grunted. Are you going to kill me? Samantha stepped back with the gun, though I could sense her scowl. No. Time to go, guys. I've heard enough pathetic pleas for one day. I turned on my heel, ignoring the stare of an abnormally quiet Onso. That yodel must have sensed my own doubt creeping in. He was thinking, just as I was, that the Kolshan's rumor seemed like shallow guidance to act on. I hoped this lead would bear fruit, but our sweep could turn into a long search. Familial relations to a traitor didn't mean this suspect agreed with his ideas, or was involved with resisting her government. However, she might know which players her brother had been connected to, so we could question those people with her help. It merited investigation, even her partiality to us wasn't certain. Let's hope Sam is clear that we're not going in to intimidate this Kolshan. We need our potential ally to like us. We couldn't seek out the shadow cast without proper information. I kept my complaints about the ceaseless walking to myself, and instead led the way toward the suspected rebels' home. The single-story home was classier than the cramped dwelling we'd broken into. The last stop size had facilitated an easy sweep for our initial interrogation. As promised, thick vines flowed in artificial entanglements from each window. Faint recognition chimed in my head, as I gazed at the peach stucco and manicured teal lawn. Was this somewhere that I had visited long ago? I hadn't associated with many people on this planet. This seems familiar, I mumbled. Onso tilted his head. It's familiar because of the lawn. That quaint shade of turquoise matches the grass species indigenous to Skalga. That must have been imported from off-world. The owner takes botany seriously, to spend that many credits on. Not that. It's like this place is tickling my memory. Samantha crossed her arms. If you say it came to you in a dream, I'm going to backhand you. Maybe it's nothing, but it's not like every building on Offa looks alike. Anyway, we shouldn't be wasting time. I'll knock, since we don't want her seeing you two first. Fine. We'll stand off in the corner in timeout. Anso perked his ears up, before trotting up to the doorstep ahead of me. And I'll talk to this Kolshan about interesting flora and their evolutionary quirks. We're going to hit it off if I have any say. I hustled after him, wrapping my claws against the frame. You'll do no such thing. We don't need a babbling primitive scaring her. The door swung open seconds after I knocked, suggesting the inhabitants saw us coming. The Kolshan's skin was a light purple, with features that I would recognize even after a decade. Her demeanor was sheepish, but her posture shifted once she focused on me. Her bulbous eyes widened with recognition, emotions swirling within. I stared at her in shock, feeling the buried guilt for my treatment of Marcel return. That answered who her traitorous brother was. My heart broke to know my first officer's name was being dragged through the mud. The yodel squinted with puzzlement, as I threw myself forward and wrapped Ossel in a hug. Oh, so you're friends with this Kolshan? Sam shuffled into view, huffing. I'm thinking the same thing. Whose side are you on, Sovlin? Right, it's fine. I saw the predators on your approach. I knew they were here, Ossel stammered, as she avoided looking at the Terrans. I have many questions for you, Sovlin. The first of which is why you're with them. Because they're good people who deserve support. They're trying to repair the galaxy, and I trust them with that responsibility. Besides that, I owe them, I grumbled. I should have protected Riesel, Aussie, and I'm sorry. Tyler inched forward, tilting his head. Real talk. Why are you so familiar with a Kolshan? This is Riesel's sister, Tyler. You know, my first officer, the one who saved Marcel? No shit? Well, I'll be damned. The tall human's body language warmed in an instant, abandoning his standoffish posture. Marcel would love to talk to you, but for now, we'll take care of you. I ain't forgot how much humanity owes Riesel. Gojid's Mida wiped us out if not for him. That makes you one of us. Your name's Aussie. Ossel shifted with discomfort, clasping her tentacles together. My name is Ossel. You don't hate me? Why would I? 'Cause you were born a Kolshan? That's as dumb as folks hating us 'cause our eyes are different. We're here for the Shadow Caste. I'm not their biggest fan. Please, come in, I don't want anyone seeing you talking to me. Ossel shied away, as the humans padded into the residence. Anso and I tailed behind, inspecting the interior's photographs and plants. My personal connection to this Kolshan likely helped her to accept that the Terrans weren't an immediate threat. There was no telling what she knew about the conspiratorial government, but I was pleased that she expressed distaste. It was also reassuring that Tyler spoke as if she was a friend, because I couldn't leave her to face whatever consequences were coming. I owed it to Riesel to get her off this world, safely, with Duerden antimatter hanging over Offa. One problem. If I'm not mistaken, Ossel looks outright disgusted by the predators. I'm not sure she actually wanted to invite them inside, or would want to stick with us, even with a guarantee of protection. Oblivious Tyler made himself at home, slouching in a kitchen chair. Right then. I'll get to the point. Is it true you're working against the Kolshan government? Who told you that? Ossel hissed. It's why we're here. We asked around, and were told that your brother, that Riesel, was a traitor, and you might be too. Again, slandering Riesel's name? Forgive me for raising my voice. I'm not challenging you. I heaved a sigh. Aussie, the humans aren't going to go off at a single insult. Believe it or not, they're immensely patient. I've challenged their wishes directly, even argued in bad faith, and nothing happened. They don't experience bloodlust. My anger issues are much worse than Tyler's, Onso added. Humans are soft. I was in the process of scientifically verifying that you can manipulate them just by adopting a cute expression. If you want to be treated like a child, Officer Cardona growled. Look, Ossel, we're trying to figure out where the Shadow Fleet's been hiding all these years. We were looking for someone who already wanted to take them down, and has a head start searching. Given that I heard you say you don't like M, we're on the same side. No, we're not. I haven't lifted a tentacle against the government, the Kolshan protested. People spoke out after learning about the omnivores, and every one of them disappeared within a day. Our leaders scare me almost as much as you do. I know they don't have our best interests at heart, and they'll do things like sacrificing evac shuttles, but what could I do? I didn't want to end up like Resell. Everyone hates my race, so I can't leave. I wrapped my arm around Ossel's shoulders, as tears streamed down her face. Easy. I understand what it's like to be viewed as a monster, maybe even to view yourself as a monster. So do the humans. Just because you didn't want to be killed doesn't mean you supported the Shadow Caste. But I'm not with humanity. I don't like or trust predators, and I'm certainly not pleased they've taken over my planet. Resell told me to trust humans, just like you did, Sovlin, but I hoped never to interact with them. Whatever you say about bloodlust, they're built for killing. The same way a flower is coded to bloom. So don't think I'll overlook their cursed lifestyle. I won't serve you, humans. If you need to kill me for that, get it over with. Samantha had turned her back on the conversation, struggling to withhold her comments. Onso had drifted to her side, since the Yodel's skill was in intellect rather than nurturing. I had already said my piece on humanity's kindness, to no avail. That left a stupefied Tyler, who rose from his chair in slow increments. The human sank to one knee in front of Ossel, rather than remaining at his full height. The Kolshan gasped as the predator pulled her into a gentle hug, despite the insults she'd lobbed at his species. If this display of empathy didn't convince her, nothing would. Tyler pulled away, bowing his head. I'm disappointed to hear those thoughts, but thanks for your honesty. I'm sorry that we frighten you so much, but we won't kill you. Pinky promise. You ain't got to do nothing you don't want, or to like us. I mean, I wanted aliens to like me, but I guess it's hard when my lifestyle disgusts you. What I need is to remind you we both don't like the Shadow Fleet, so having M gone helps us all. Plus, if we wanted to kill everyone on Alpha, we could have glassed you, Sam commented. She's right. But it's not up to us to decide what parts of nature, what life forms, and which lifestyles are acceptable. We believe the galaxy has seen too much death and suffering. We wish we all coulda got along. Even if you don't believe those words from a predator, the Shadow Caste can't go through the motions of pretending to care. Doesn't that prove we're less bad than them? Ossel was silent for several seconds, before she forced herself to gaze at the human. I thought about reaching out to Earth before, but I knew you couldn't help me. You're dangerous. I must be out of my mind to be considering this. But the Shadow Fleet are predators too, so I guess I'm just selling them to their own kind. You know where they're hiding? I gasped. I have a guess. The Shadow Caste always hides in plain sight, and their self-selected name is about hiding beneath the official government. What if it's literal? Where's a better place to camp under our noses than beneath the Federation's hull? There must be a reason the capital won't authorize construction of new bunkers, or anything underground. That actually makes sense, Sam acknowledged, with a lilt of surprise. I flicked my claws in agreement. The hall is built like a fucking maze. Perfect for hiding corridors or rooms. Ain't certain, but it's worth looking. Thanks, Ossel, Tyler growled. Join us. I know how you feel about humans, but you don't really think Riesel was all wrong. We can help you start over. Also, if we find the shadow caste, you can see the truth with your own eyes. You'll know that they are the enemy of all sapient life, not us. The Kolshan shuddered. I'll join you, in case you need more insight about Alpha. It's for the best to see that those monsters are taken out. Besides, it's not really a choice. If the shadow caste hangs around, and they find out I helped you, I'm dead. That won't happen under our watch, and, you have my word, we'll make sure Riesel's name isn't tarnished any longer. He had compassion for one of ours, and it cost him everything. I only hope that I can show half of the same kindness with you. Welcome to our family. Anso wagged his tail. Welcome. I'll get in contact with UN Command on the way. Let's go send those shadow pricks to an early grave. Samantha raised her gun in agreement. Come on. You heard the yodel. I coaxed Ossel out the door, grateful that I could achieve some penance for Riesel's demise. His relatives were the closest thing I had to surviving family, apart from Hunter. I hoped our theory about the shadow caste's location was correct, and that it correlated with where Slanek had been taken. Beyond rescuing that Venlil, we deserved the truth about why the Kolshans had set forth to rid the galaxy of predators. After everything we'd endured to get here, I was confident our team could face these final revelations together. It felt right for humanity to bring down the Federation's secrets on the same day their empire crumbled.